Alex is not here today. I have to think about that. And we just wait maybe people coming in, but so I just welcome you all to this to our webinar series. And today it's about conflict management systems in workplace. I personally think that it is a very, very important topic to prevent and also resolve conflicts in organization before they actually escalate and then lead to, I think you will come to this, high cost, bad mood, loss of employees, and so on. And this is because this is what conflicts do at work when they are not resolved, when there is no structure, right, to resolve them. And there are many studies that show that employees are so concerned and actually affected by the conflicts, and that they then perform less or lose motivation or are more sick often and suffer mentally. Actually, we have had in our company, we run those programs, we call them to discover absenteeism, where we are called into organization where there is a really high rate of people that are sick. And we are doing analyses about this. And usually one of the factors that we find out why people are not that motivated anymore and either be really absent or are there but mentally absent is about conflict that are in the organizations. Yeah, but you will hear in a second a lot more about this. And as always, I would like to say a few words about the IAM campus. But since there is so many faces that they already know, so I don't want to tell you in detail about the offer of the international mediation training. I think by now you know about that. But maybe I can share just quickly some interesting, what are we doing there in this international mediation training? And we had kind of for my feeling, a training highlight yesterday. Our lecturer was Professor Vögel Cochain from the University of Kent and a specialist in the Northern Ireland conflict. And he introduced the group into the subject and to the specifics and circumstances of the mediation that actually took place for this peace process that led to the Good Friday Agreement in the late 90s. And then the group simulated that mediation, meaning all 20 participants in this group. Sarah was there, and also Rebecca was there. So all these 20 participants represented a total of 10 parties. And there was also 2 mediators, and they conducted this discussion. So I think it was a great learning experience about also like big scale multi-party mediations. If you have more questions about this, just contact me. I'm just going to write my email in the chat. So now to you, Sezil. I'm so happy and glad that you are here. I just very briefly, I introduce you. Sezil Durmuş is an attorney at law registered in the Istanbul Bar and a mediator registered in the Turkey Ministry of Justice. And she focuses on contract laws, corporate law, and employment law by assisting her clients in structuring and negotiating legal transaction. But she also is engaged in those kinds of conflict in the same matters as a mediator. And her expertise is the structure of conflict management systems. You have done that for various organizations. And also Sezil is a trainer in our mediation training. So welcome. Sezil, I give you the floor.
Thank you for such a nice introduction, Andrea. I am happy to be here, and happy holidays to everyone who's celebrating something in their countries. It seems that all around the world, people are celebrating different kind of things today. So happy holidays to all of you. Today, our topic will be conflict management systems in workplaces. As Andrea said, I'm a lawyer, an attorney, and a mediator, and I work on employment cases, both as an attorney and as a mediator. So today, when I'm talking about conflict management systems in workplaces, I will have a perspective of a lawyer, of course. So as I start, my plan is to have 40 minutes of presentation for you, and then I will have rest of the 20 minutes for your questions and discussions. So let me start by sharing my screen with you. Okay, you see it right? No problem? Okay. Okay, here is our plan for today. First of all, I will talk only a little about the terminology of the conflict and conflict management so that we know we are on the correct place. And then I will talk a little bit about the roots of the conflict and mobbing. I will mention a little bit about the phases, the escalation of the conflict. And then I will mention again a little bit about the impacts of conflict and mobbing on employees and on the workplaces. And then we will talk about the system and its principles. While doing that, I thought like this. I had a client, a young woman who was a victim of a mobbing. And while we were preparing for her lawsuits, she started to tell me her story. But while doing that, it was interesting because she was picking really right words as if she knew the theory behind the conflict and mobbing. So I thought it would be interesting to have an interview with her. And I proposed such thing to her. She accepted. And we did the interview and we published it. It was really nice. And today I thought it was a 5 pages long interview, but for today I thought maybe I can just shorten this interview and then show it to you. And then we can structure rest of our webinar on Jane's story. Of course, I changed the names. I didn't have a client called Jane. She was a Turkish person, but just to respect the confidentiality, I changed the names and times and etc. I will read you a little part of this interview. The reading will take just 3 minutes. During this 3 minutes, I advise you to close your eyes and try to visualize what Jane has been through during this mobbing and try to put yourself in her shoes so you can comprehend and understand what she felt. And then, as I said, rest of the webinar will be based on the story of Jane. So if you're ready, I start to read it. As I said, it's going to take only 3 minutes. So just let's start. She says, after graduation, I started working as an intern in a company. The unit I worked was intense. Email and telephone traffic were constantly going on in evenings, on weekends, and on holidays. I remember that once when I was on a dinner with my family, Mr. John, who was working as an expert, kept me on the phone for hours on an issue and said, I don't have time at some point, and hung up the phone. In general, I thought it was a busy and difficult workplace environment. I found such communication awkward, and I was uncomfortable with it. My job description was not clear. It was almost limitless. On the one hand, I was rushing to secretariat. On the other hand, I was given higher duties that I was not qualified. I did not have ability to negotiate about my tasks. Nobody listened to me. It was common attitude towards everyone, not special to me. So I worked hard, day and night. I was trying to do my job well. I was asking questions, trying to get information, asking experts about their opinions. I remember that once expert Mr. Jones said, this is useless for a draft report I prepared. All experts were challenging, but I remember that I was very angry with this sentence, especially at Mr. Jones. At the end of 6 months internship, we need to enter and pass a performance evaluation to be accepted as an assistant specialist. This evaluation includes both a written exam and opinions of experts. So I studied hard. I got the highest score in written exam that year. By the way, this is the highest score of the country, she says. Despite my low score given by opinions, I earned the permanent job. Expert Mr. John objected my exam results. He said other interns with higher verbal scores failed the written exam, so there must have been a mistake. He carried the subject to senior management. Fortunately, he did not succeed. I was person non grata in the office. It means the person not wanted in politics. A restless and difficult period awaited me. Nobody said anything about the objection. No explanation was made from the senior management. The subject was closed. From then on, Mr. John frequently ignored me. Then other people started to do the same. I guess they thought if they were close with me, they would be in a difficult situation. Although I was promoted, some intern jobs continued. I objected to this situation. I got answers such as, it's your choice. I did not know what that meant. I didn't want to lose my job. Our director was a good man. He appreciated my exam results. One day, while I was getting coffee, I told him that my intern jobs were continuing. I think he made a warning about it. For a while, I had opportunity to concentrate on my main job. Although my social life in the office was not great, at least my job was on the right track. However, that director quitted shortly after. At this point, real nightmare started. Our manager was promoted as director, and expert Mr. John became the manager. From this point on, I entered a period in which I had to rush to every job, from packing to archiving. I had no one left in the management to submit my complaint. Then my performance got worse. I was unable to focus. I could not put myself together. People started to talk about my incompetency. Heart palpitations started within a few months. I thought it was because of my workload, but when it got unbearable, I went to doctor. I was diagnosed with panic attack. I resigned. So this is the story of Jane. By the way, let me show you the screen again. You can take a picture of it if you want, but in the rest of the webinar, I will keep on talking about Jane to make it more clearer about the conflict management. So if you're ready, let's start. Let's start with the terminology. What is mobbing? What is conflict? To define the conflict, there are many theories, but I will talk about the theory of Robert Ezra Park. He says that the basic interaction of all living creatures is competition. If it's a plant, it's to reach the sunlight. If it's an animal, to reach food and protection. If it's a human, if it's a person, it can be a tremendous amount of needs that we are competing. When the competition has a social contact with others, here is the conflict. Then we adaptate to the new situation, and then we normalize our new situation. Today, we will only talk about the conflict. We know that terminologically, we have two kinds of conflicts. One of them is destructive one. It focuses more on person. It has emotional barriers. It has uncertainty, pressure, and rigidity. On the other hand, there is a constructive conflict that we want to encourage because it focuses on problem. It is solution oriented. It motivates people, and it's flexible. So we have both kinds of conflicts. And today, most probably, we will be talking about the destructive conflict. While conflict is this, what's mobbing? To define mobbing, I will have a little help from World Health Organization. They define the violence as following: the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting, with physical impacts, psychological impacts, sexual impacts, or deprivation. And here is the mobbing. So when we're talking about mobbing, we're not just talking about a regular conflict, we're talking about a violence that is not permitted by law, that has actual sanctions with the law. So conflict is something that we want to encourage to be constructive, but mobbing is something that we want to prevent and we want to protect people from. So what are the roots of conflict and mobbing? The roots of conflict may be very different. There are many theories explaining it. Today, I will use the theory set up by Christopher Moore. He says that there may be 5 different types of conflict roots. One of them is relationship conflicts, like miscommunication or strong emotions or stereotyping or repetitive negative behavior. And in Jane's case, she said that there was an awkward communication in the office. Probably there were lots of miscommunications in the office causing many kinds of conflicts. Christopher Moore also says that the root of the conflict may be data, like lack of information or misinformation. There is a statistics which is done with a survey in a specific workplace. This survey is done in Turkey in a specific workplace. The question is, how important is a lack of communication a reason for conflict? The important part of this survey is that the senior management, the people who are experienced almost 20 years, think that it's not really important reason for a conflict, the lack of communication. Rest of the people who are experienced with different years have different opinions about it. But in that workplace, it seems that those people do not have a big problem regarding it. So the lack of communication may be a root for conflict for some people, but not always for other people. So it depends, it changes. Christopher Moore also says that the interest can be a conflict reason, like perceived or actual conflict or an interest, a psychological interest. In Jane's case, she said Mr. John objected to her exam results, saying that other interns would do better. So maybe Mr. John had another interest for having another intern to be promoted as the specialist. We don't know, it can be. Christopher Moore also says that the reason of a conflict may be structural, like time constraints or unequal authority, unequal power balance. And in Jane's case, she said, my job description was limitless. She said there is a structural reason for conflict about the clarity of her role. And that was the thing that started the whole story. As done in this company, there was another survey in which a question asked to the employees, how important is a lack of role clarity a reason for conflict? And in that survey, it is also interesting that the people graduated from technical sciences of universities, such as engineers, think that the lack of a role clarity is very important to be a reason for conflict, whereas postgraduates, like PhDs, do not think it's really important. Rest of the people have differing opinions. It's not important for our case right now, but it shows that people with different backgrounds may have different understandings about the lack of role clarity. So they may have different needs. So it's really important to know about your company and know about your employees. There is no big formula which explains whether communication or whether role clarity has a specific amount of importance on the conflict. It depends. And finally, Christopher Moore says that the reason for conflict may be our values, like ideologies, like religion, like worldview, or different kind of things. Okay, then what's the reason for mobbing? Heinz Lehmann has studied 800 cases, and he says that the reason for a mobbing may be either careless or helpless management, or incompetent management, or partial management, which means that the management taking sides. So he says that it's always a reason caused by the management. Remember, there are lots of reasons which may cause conflict, and it can be constructive or destructive. But when it comes to mobbing, it's always a poor management, and it's always destructive. In Jane's case, it was the lack of role clarity. She said, my job description was limitless. There was a power imbalance because Mr. John was pushing pressure on Jane without any legitimized authority, and she had no application authority. All of them are related with the poor management. What were the phases that Jane went through? First of all, she had a discomfort. She explained that the workplace environment was difficult. She said there was an awkward communication going on, and she said she was uncomfortable with it. Then she perceived a conflict. There was a little dispute between Jane and Mr. John. She said, my job description was not clear, and she said she objected to it, but she said nobody listened to her. So when nobody listened to her, she was in a dispute. It was just not an active one, but she was in a dispute. She had one. It was just she couldn't make anyone listen to it. Then she personalized the issue. She said, I was angry, especially at Mr. John. Then there was an open conflict. Mr. John started to restrain Jane to reach her goals by objecting to her exam results. And then new circumstances began. In Jane's case, it was just the subject being closed. It seems that there is no new circumstances, but there is, because in Jane's case, she was in a position where she was really uncomfortable. Someone objected to her exam results and nobody made an explanation. So she's in a situation where she doesn't know what to do. And this is her new circumstances. Louis Pondy, who is the person that generated this five steps of escalation, says that Jane and John, these people may be on different stairs of the escalation of conflict at the same time. So this means while Mr. John have already personalized the conflict, Jane may be feeling just a little bit discomfort or vice versa. And he also says that the steps may change their order. For example, the open conflict may come before the personalizing of the issue, or they may be a dispute before the discomfort. So it depends on the issue. There is no formula. This is just a basic picture. But the story of Jane is not ending here. It continues. The conflict becomes chronic because she says that Mr. John frequently ignores her. Then the management intervenes. In this case, there's a nice man, the director, who warns other people about Jane, but when he quits shortly after, the management intervenes the conflict with silence. They do not do anything. He says there is no one to complain. This is the kind of intervention that the management does. Either they take sides or either they just stay silent. And this makes the conflict more chronic. As the intervention of the management becomes as a silence, the chronic mobbing made to Jane becomes legitimized. And with this legitimized environment, people start to stamp Jane. They say she's incompetent because she cannot cope with her job. Then she resigns after her panic attack. This is the story of Jane. What were the impacts? There was a nice study made by CPP Global in 2008 with 8,000 employees all around Europe and America and Brazil. They asked many questions to those employees. I just took 3 of them. One of them is, how does conflict make you feel? The other one is, what negative outcomes have you experienced? And the third one is, what positive outcomes have you experienced? People say that they may be demotivated, sorry, and like a quarter of them said that conflict make them demotivated. And like another quarter of them tells that it makes them confident, excited, energized. So I think that these people are facing constructive conflict. What negative outcomes? Personal insults, sickness, cross-departmental conflict, bullying, people leaving organization, people being fired, people being moved to different departments, projects being failed. What positive outcomes? Major innovations, increased motivation, higher performance, better solutions, improved relationships, and better understandings. So constructive conflicts are improving our workplace, are improving our works, whereas destructive conflicts have really negative outcomes. What about mobbing? When it's mobbing, we call the person as victim. The victim may have different kind of impacts. In first level, the victim may not see this as an irregular kind of interaction, may see it just usual interaction in the work life. She may tolerate it. She may feel sadness, stress, crying, concentration disorder. In Jane's case, she said it was a common attitude towards everyone, so not special to her. She was trying to normalize it. In second level, the victim weakens, the victim has weakening power. The victim has problems to go to work, maybe a little depression, gaining or losing weight. In Jane's case, she was saying that she is unable to focus. Maybe she was having a little depression, I don't know. And in the third level, she was unable to do her job. She was unable to protect herself. She may have had panic attacks or severe depressions or self-harms or suicides, etc. In this case, she had panic attack. This is not it. It also has impacts on the workplace. In the same survey made by CPP Global, they asked the question, do you ever have to deal with a conflict in the workplace? As you may see, more than 70% of the people said they at least occasionally have a kind of conflict in the workplace. They made a calculation in the same survey. They found that the weekly average of one employee dealing with a conflict is 2.8 hours. They multiplied it with the minimum wage in USA in 2008. And they found that the average cost of conflict to the national economy is $359 billion. Another survey is done by American Management Association. They found that the chairmen and managers, which means the senior management, spare at least quarter of their time by dealing with the conflicts of other people. So as this number is calculated by minimum wage, here it shows the importance. In another survey made by People's Resolution in UK, they found that HR professionals spend at least 3 hours of their time in a week by dealing with the conflicts of other people, and that constitutes at least a month in a year of their time. In Italy, I think it was Heinz Lehmann, he found that after 6 months of mobbing, the performance of an employee, the victim, decreases by 40%, and he or she uses at least 2 months of sick leave in a year. People also say that they decrease their work, they decrease their effort in the work, they lose time because of sadness, and they just get away, they change their job. So it has severe damages on both the employee and on the workplace. Okay, so we have talked about the terminology. We know what's the conflict. We know it's just the basic interaction We know that there is a constructive and destructive kind of it, and we know that we want to encourage the constructive conflict, whereas we want to train and transform the destructive kind of the conflict. And we know that we need to have a proper system to prevent any kind of mobbing. We know that the conflict may have different kinds of roots, but the root of the mobbing is always the poor management. And we know that both the destructive conflict and the mobbing has severe impacts on both employees and the workplaces. So these are the information that we've been through. What are we going to do with those information? We will create a system. What type of system? There are basically 4 types of conflict management systems. I will talk all of them one by one. First of all, this is imagine the conflict management as a building. In that building, the communication-based system is our roof. It's the everyday protection. It's the most useful, artistic, and emotional one. So if there's no roof, the pillars of our building will have no use. It includes the communication and negotiation skills, trainings about them, facilitation, conflict coaching, etc. All of them which structures the organizational culture, the communication culture in the organization. One of our pillars is interest-based systems. It includes mediation, conciliation, and any kind of hybrid method that you can imagine of. Another pillar is rights-based system. It includes complaint systems and investigation procedures. It's a less wider pillar, as you see. I made this whitenesses in purpose. It's a little bit less wider pillar, but it's a must, and it will be better to be organized according to the legislation in your country. And last but not least, the third pillar of our system is the power-based system. It includes workplace rules, administrative procedures. It's the load-bearing column, which means the main column of our building. You can decorate it as you want, but you cannot remove it. It's the main column. So whole system relies on the power-based system. In Jane's case, all of those systems were collapsed because she said, my job description was not clear. It seems that there were no proper workplace rules. Either there were rules or they were not being applied properly. So the power-based system were collapsed in Jane's case. She also did not have any rights-based system because she said there was no one left in the management to sublet her complaint. When this nice directed quitted, she had nowhere else to go. There was no system that she can apply for. And the interest-based system was also collapsed because she said, I did not have any ability to negotiate. People may have this difficulty, and there was no system in the workplace which can support her by mediation or conciliation. She didn't have any support. The workplace didn't give her that. And of course, the roof was collapsed because she said it was a really difficult workplace environment and it was an awkward communication going on between people. So in Jane's case, the whole building was really not there. So we will talk about how to establish a system which includes all of these pillars and the roof properly. How do we do that? It's lucky that we have 4 principles: integrity, competency, diversity, and transformity. Now I will talk about them by each of them. First of all, we will start with an investigation. Remember that we talked about there may be lots of reasons for conflict, and it may change depending on the workplace. For example, in that workplace, the senior management was seeing the lack of communication not so much a reason for conflict, whereas other people gave more importance to it. And in the same workplace, while the engineers were thinking that the lack of role clarity is a big importance for conflict, the other people didn't think so. It cannot be generalized to all people all around the world. You need to know about the employees in your company. So we start with an investigation, either by surveys or by interviews, either by qualitative or quantitative research methods. We need to know about our employees and their needs. Then we set our goals. If in our workplace, people give really big importance to communication, then our goal may be to train our employees regarding it. If it's a big if it's a big lack of role clarity, then our goal may be to define each position's job step by step. So our goal depends on the results of our investigation. And we set up our workplace rules according to it, so that no one like Jane will have any problem like my job description was not clear. And then we go on with individual learning. I know that it's not possible to train every employee in the workplace with all those conflict management information, mobbing information, conflict management system information. The type and the scope of the trainings will depend on the positions and hierarchy of the employees. But we make sure that each employee at least gets an orientation about the conflict management system in the workplace and the opportunities to apply in case when they need any help, so that anyone like Jane will not say, I did not have the ability to negotiate, so I just didn't say anything. They need to know that they need to know how to get a support when they feel they need. And then after time, we hope for an organizational learning, which means a common vision in the company. It's like a shared goal. In our case, Jane and Mr. John did not share a goal. It seemed like they were in the same team, but reaching for different kind of goals, and it doesn't make any sense. So we are trying to improve the organizational learning, the shared vision in the company, so that we do not face awkward communications or difficult workplace environments. We also want to have diverse amount of application procedures for people to get help. In Jane's case, she didn't have anyone to submit her complaint after that nice director quitted. We want to have more than one application procedures for people to get help, like mediation, conciliation, and any hybrid methods that you can think of, as well as formal complaint procedures. We want them to be voluntary, so we do not put Jane to use any of those application procedures. We want procedures to be impartial. Most of the time, we encourage companies to use outsource mediators, outsource facilitators, because it's not nice to have your HR department head to also act as a mediator in a workplace conflict. It doesn't seem impartial. We want it to be confidential, so we do not record as much as possible, of course. We do not want to take recordings of all applications, and we do not want to record the specifics of those needs, so that no one goes to the file and sees what Sezil or Andrea said about any kind of things. We want it to be informal, so we want to get rid of all bureaucracy, paperwork, signatures. That frightens people. We want it to be informal as much as possible, of course, and we want it to be simple. As well as there are a diverse amount of application procedures, we do not want it to be a puzzle. We want it to be simple. And then We keep on periodic investigations. We keep on knowing our employees. We get feedback from Jane if she uses one of those application procedures, and we review the precedents, how things went. Did it went good? Did it went bad? So when we do this, what kind of outcomes are we expecting? We're of course expecting some good outcomes. Here are some example results. In the National Bank of Canada, HR experts get some training about negotiation, and they established a dispute resolution system. They structured application procedures, and they report that the disputes decreased by 50% and the legal costs decreased by 85%. And we never know what kind of good impacts that the employees had. In Motorola, they established a systematic conflict management. They used mediation clause in their supplier contracts, so they also established a commercial conflict management system, and they report that their legal costs decreased by 75%. In other corporation, they also use the systematic use of alternative dispute resolution methods, and they say that the number of their legal cases decreased from 200 to 20, and their costs decreased by 50%. In another company, they use the conflict management system in one specific project, and they report that the project was completed 144 days early with a lot of savings in the budget. It was also implemented in a high school. It's a high school in which the violence is a big problem. They established a long-term schedule, and they trained the students on negotiation, and they encouraged mediation between the students, and they report that the violence decreased over time. There are no numbers because it's a high school. And again, in other company, in other institution, they established a systematic conflict management, and they report that the duration of the specific set of labor disputes decreased 4,200 hours. The common feature in all those reportings is that they made it systematic. It's not a system where you can get the results in a day or two. It's a systematic approach, so you may expect the results in the long term if you can manage it. So I guess yes, I made it in 40 minutes, I guess. I know it was a quick one, but if you have any questions, if you have any points that you want to add, if you want to make a comment, you are more than welcome.
Thank you so much, Sezil. This was, I can't even find words, so interesting and so structured, and so many sources also that you found and shared with us. Thank you so much for this. So if you have questions, you can either just unmute yourself and ask them, or write it in the chat. Yeah, Sarah.
I have a question regarding the conflict in the company. For example, when people have a problem, the manager or the company wants to defend their company because they believe that it is not their problem, or it is not the management problem. It is the problem of, it is a personal problem. How we can elaborate for the manager or for the company that it is not a personal feeling or personal problem, but it is the company problem.
Mm-hmm. You mean how do you explain this to the management, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it's a great question, because this is where everything begins. If they're convinced that the poor management is the reason for mobbing and reason for destructive conflicts, it can change a lot of things. So as I'm a lawyer, I know that there are big losses in possible lawsuits. And it's just a mathematical explanation that I make to my clients. For example, if there are 1,000 employees in a company and they have at least 30 or 40 lawsuits in a year, it's just a mathematical issue to multiply the compensation they pay. And here is the cost of not having a proper management on the conflict management system. But if you're a sociologist, if you're a psychologist, you can also talk about the surveys that I showed you, explaining how much it impacts the performance of the people, how much time they spend on thinking, feeling the conflict they face. So if you cannot convince the management, even though you have a system on the paper, if you don't apply it, it doesn't make any sense. So it's important that the management is convinced that this is needed and this is very crucial, and that it affects the performance and the budget of the company as well as the well-being of the people.
There is a comment in the chat of Neslihan, and she said, in my doctor thesis, burnout and mobbing that occurred 23% in 2009 in Turkey.
Yes, it's possible. There are many different kinds of surveys also made by the state. There are different numbers out there, but I believe it's 20. But there's also another point. When you ask people whether you face a mobbing, people usually say yes, because they do not know what a mobbing is. They may label any kind of conflict they have as a mobbing. So it's a tricky issue. You need to know that the answers of the people who say that they are facing mobbing are informed about the scope of the mobbing. So those kind of surveys may be misleading. I don't know. So
yeah, she added to this that it was in a university of 2,223 people in Bosphorus University.
Yeah, the universities are the worst environment for mobbing in most of the time. I can tell this for Turkey. I don't know what's going on in other countries, but if it's a university, yes, it can be.
I can tell this also for Germany. There is a really high conflict in universities.
Yes,
that
really
also comes to mediation.
Yeah. It's really interesting because in universities, all of the employees are professors, PhD students, etc. And it's really interesting to know that the mobbing is has the highest scores in universities. It's it's unfortunate.
Wendy asked a question, what about intercultural elements such as racism or prejudices? Do these systems cover this?
Value conflicts are the most, how do I say, most damaging one, probably. Let me show you this again, just a second. Oh, sorry, I couldn't do it. Here, Christopher Moore said that the value conflicts such as ideology, religion, race are reason for conflicts. And this is the hardest one to resolve, actually, compared to other ones. But when we're talking about conflict management systems, we need to make sure that these people facing those kind of conflicts have a application procedure, have an opportunity to go and ask for help. You cannot have a specific system for racism conflicts. You cannot have a specific system for relationship conflicts. It doesn't make any sense. You just need to ensure that people do not feel alone and that people can seek for help by using simple application procedures.
There is another question from Sarah. And she asked, to measure the situation in organization, would you recommend a survey that specifically asks about conflict, but that would require people to be aware of conflict? Or would you recommend to ask other, maybe more general questions in the survey? Which ones? I can also add to this later. Yeah, go.
I think it depends on the company. For example, if you're talking about a manufacturer company employing like 10,000 employees, you need to have some kind of surveys. Interviews are not enough to do it, and it's not time efficient. You need to have surveys. But before conducting those surveys, I strongly encourage you to get a professional help, because the surveys that you're going to apply to blue-collar employees may not be the same that you apply to white-collar employees, or the surveys that you apply to, I don't know, sales department may differ in some questions from the questions that you ask to manufacturing departments or finance departments. So in order to know your employees, try to get a professional help because it has some details to make a survey. And it's not that easy to just read it from the internet and try to do it on your own. The worst thing is that when you do a wrong survey, you get wrong results and you establish a wrong system. And then you start wondering why it didn't help. So Einstein said, as everyone knows, it's just a classical example. If I had a big problem and I had only 1 hour to solve it, I would spend 55 minutes of my time trying to find the correct question, and I would solve it in the rest 5 minutes. So the whole system relies on the questions that you ask. For example, if you ask people just randomly, have you ever experienced mobbing? People will say yes to it. Maybe they did not experience this. So you will find out whether they were faced a mobbing by asking right questions, not directly. So get a professional help about it.
Sarah, just to add real quick, we have done a lot of those surveys and polls in very different institutions like blue-collar workers, but also ministries. And we there is a setup of questions that are evaluated and tested, and that is also in Germany we call it the GWU Psyche. It's like a set of questions that leads to the mental health of employees. But I think it's not sufficient, so you have to adapt it, as you said, Sezil, to different environments there. But if you want to know more about that, you can also contact me afterwards.
I think Jana is asking.
Yeah, Jana.
Thank you. First of all, Cecil, many thanks for that very interesting presentation. That was really great. What I'd like to ask is, I understand and would say I fully agree that at the end of the day, it needs to have a systematic approach in each and every organization to overcome mobbing and any other kind of conflict, basically. And positive results will show off like in a later time, so it's not instant. So of course this is clear, but what would you say is like a more short-term measure to overcome like very acute conflicts in organizations? So not only between two people, but more like, you know, kind of really organizations where teams go down because of too many various conflicts?
That's a really good question. And as a lawyer, I may not respond it very properly. Maybe a sociologist or a psychologist may have a great advice about it because we work on distant term results most of the time as lawyers. But encouraging people to have an understanding that they are in the same team is really important as far as I see in our mediation sessions. they think that they are in different teams and it causes hostile communication. Having people to feel that they are in the same team is the crucial one. This is the door that goes to common vision. This is the door that goes to organizational learning. And this is the door that opens a nice communication between each other. So how do you make people to feel in the same team? I don't know this because it depends on the company, as I said, and it depends on the current environment of that company. But trying to create those team understanding is really crucial. As a lawyer and as a mediator, I can tell this. So I know that it's not a proper answer to your question, but I refrain to make more explanations in purpose because it's not really my job.
It's excellent, Sezil. It's a proper answer to my question. Okay. Absolutely. So I take away you'd rather focus on team workshops and building like a common denominator for the different parts of the team.
Yes, there's a psychological study made in like 1950s or something like that. There were young boys at the age of 10 or something like that. They were in a summer school and they put them in two teams, in two football teams. And then they said, you are going to have lunch in those teams. You are going to go to bed in those teams. And then they started to witness the hostile communication in those two teams at each other. And then after a while, they changed the teams, they mixed all of those young boys, and they witnessed how the hostile communication goes on in those teams. Just a second. I am sorry. As this is a holiday, I'm in the house and someone knocked on the door. I'm sorry. So the understanding of the team is really crucial. It affects young boys in the football teams, and it affects adult employees, whether or not they are 20 years old or 50 years old or 70 years old, I don't know. Teams are really important. We need to know that we are a whole team in the whole company. We're not competing with each other. We're going to the same goal. Jane and John didn't know that. They were thinking they are competing each other, and it didn't serve any good.
Sezil, there are two more questions. Would you mind to answer them? I know we are a little bit over time. Would that be okay for you?
Of course.
Okay, so there is one question from Bharati, and she asked, getting entry into the organization is the key. Can you tell how to go about that? Like how to approach the organization, how to offer like this systems to organizations. What is a suggestion from your side?
I guess it's the question close to what Zehra asked, how to approach the company and the management to convince them that this is really useful and this is a proper way to handle the management. As I said, a lawyer will do it by calculating the budget of the system. A sociologist or a psychologist may do it differently by focusing on the time and the feelings and emotions and the stress and the decrease of performance in the workplace. So in which profession you are, you can decide how to approach the management. But the important thing is if it seems that the management is not really convinced with the system, do not spend your time for something that they will not use. It's really important that they are sincerely in the need of both establishing and then using the system. As I said, I'm a lawyer and I'm just talking about the numbers. I know the psychological part of it, but I'm not trying to put myself in a position where I'm talking about some other profession's conclusions. I talk about the budgets, and most of the time the budget is the most convincing tool for talking with the companies, because the finance department will be there. If you can put some numbers in front of them, like the CPP did, they found at least $359 million for a budget in the national economy. If you can come up with numbers, this is a really nice and short way to convince the management.
There is one other question from Marius, and he says, that was very informative. Thank you very much indeed. The system described seemed to be a good one, but I'm thinking that it may be too difficult, too complicated for many organizations. What are 3 most important elements you would use to design simple or basic conflict management systems?
Make a proper investigation and put at least 2 kinds of application procedures. Know your employees and then establish an application procedure. But always know your employees. If there are many engineers in the company, the results may be different. If there are many sociologists in the company, the result will be very different. So do not start anything before you really know your company. So the basic and the simplest way to start the conflict management system is the quantitative or qualitative research methods. And he said, thank you.
Yeah, there is a lot of thanks for you, Sezil, in the chat, and I will, as soon as everybody have left, you have the time to read this. I want to thank you. It was very, very interesting, and I hope we can have a continuation here on this webinars, maybe in a couple of months, with a further topic in organization systems. I think this is such an important topic, and I have the feeling you have a lot more to tell us about. And there's a source of knowledge that I would be happy if we can repeat that once again.
I'm honored to be here with you, Andrea. It's such a nice environment to discuss those topics. And I want to I want to thank Bridget, because she said çok teşekkür ederim and aferin on the chat there. Some Turkish words. Thank you.
I did. What was that to you? Okay.
Yeah, she said thank you and good job in Turkish. Thank you.
That's nice. Okay. Thank you to all the participants also for your very good question, and as always your concentration, and I hope to see you in the next webinar. And now I'm blank. I don't know what this is about, but please find this out on our website. We have upcoming webinars that are about mindfulness in mediation. There is another about a system. There is one webinar that is coming about music and mediation. It is a mediator from Italy, and she's also a musician. So diverse topics around this beautiful field that we all love. I think we have all in common, that we're passionate about it. And I wish you a very good day, if you have a public holiday or not. For everybody, a very good day, and see you.
Yes.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Sezil.
much. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Mandana. See you later.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me. Okay. Tick, 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 tick. I try to. Here you go.
Okay.
That was so good. I stopped the recording. Oh, that was so interesting.